We're going to jump right into it with the Law Foundation, the Alberta Law Foundation, because there's been some media coverage of the Alberta Law Foundation. Something happened. Some people resigned. What does it mean? That seems to be where it kind of falls apart. So tonight, to start things off nice and light, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the Alberta Law Foundation. So to start with, the first question that we have to ask is, what does the Alberta Law Foundation do? A bunch of different things, but there's one really, really big thing. And this is the really, really big thing that is super important for everybody to be paying attention to. So the one really, really big thing is they manage and disperse money. But in order to understand where that money comes from, we're going to try to make it a little bit relatable, if you will. So let's say, I don't know, you're a scrappy little podcast. Oh, you talk about controversial issues, you do. And let's say you get sued for, I don't know, $6 million by one of the wealthier men in Alberta, allegedly. And you don't have the funds on your own as a scrappy little upstart podcast to fight the lawsuit. So you crowdfund a bunch of money in order to launch a legal defense. And through, again, the absolute unfettered generosity of Albertans and your audience, this is getting to be a little fourth Wally. You're able to do that process. But what do you do with that money during the court process? Well, if you're smart and you listen to your lawyers, then you give it to your lawyers so that the money can only be used for legal stuffs, only things related to the legal court case. That way, people don't have to worry about you going on like a fancy vacation or something unbelievably inappropriate. And that money is held in trust. That's important. So if you're the Scrappy Little Podcast, you give all your money from the crowdfunding to the lawyers, and they hold it in trust. Now, that in trust money sits in an account, and as money tends to do when you just leave it alone, if you have put it in a good account, it earns interest. But unlike money paid up front for the purchase of something like, I don't know, children's medication that was never fully delivered, neither you nor your lawyers get that money. Instead, the interest, which in all of the in-trust accounts across the province, that can be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. That interest that you don't get, your lawyers don't get, that goes towards the Alberta Law Foundation. And the Alberta Law Foundation then uses that money to provide nonprofit legal clinics, law libraries, support for victims of vulnerable people, victims of crime, all of that stuff, which is a very, very good thing because, as it turns out, legal stuffs can be expensive. Boy, we learned that over the last year. But there are two pieces of legislation that have, much like they've done with other things, they have taken the firewalls away from the arm's length organizations, because the Law Foundation is supposed to be able to use that interest to objectively support programs that they deem of value. And there's three different areas that members of the board are appointed for. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But it's really, really important because it makes it accessible and it keeps it free from political interference, which is good because very often people find themselves in legal situations where they maybe are, I don't know, at odds with the government of the day. That's not a stretch. And especially with this particular provincial government, where we take a look at the kinds of things that they've done with utilizing the notwithstanding clause, attacking the medical rights of trans youth. There's very good reason to say, hey, there may be ideological differences, and the people who need the legal resources should still have access to the legal resources. It's very, very basic. But as we've seen with the UCP do, with a lot of even charity organizations, there's lots of nonprofits across the province that have had their funding pulled because they don't align perfectly with what the UCP's goals are. We'll call them goals to be nice. I'm going to be less nice later. But they've introduced these two pieces of and passed, by the way, they passed both pieces of legislation, but they passed these two pieces of legislation that have removed the guardrails and have actually centralized power away back in the government, away from the independent, supposed to be unbiased people. Early in 2025, the UCP introduced Bill 39. Now, that bill came right after a cut in the promised government funding to the foundation. That cut was almost 20%. So to start with, Law Foundation's sitting over here. They're doing, we're collecting the interest. Did we get some government funding as well? And the government said, hey, you know what? We're going to cut your funding by 20%. You'll like it. It'll be fine. Then they introduced Bill 39. And Bill 39, it's one of those UCP omnibus bills. And one of the things that happens with these big UCP omnibus bills is little things get snuck in. And there was this little piece that got snuck in where it said, in regards to funding commitments, the legislation effectively said that it mandated 50% of the budget for legal aid had to come from the Alberta Law Foundation, which is not what it was before. Before it was 25%. So the government said, hey, we're going to cut your funding by 20%, and then we're going to make you pay 25% more of the overall budget for legal aid. They also required, and this is where it starts to get bonkers, ministerial approval for any funding of any programs above $250,000. And when you think about the kind of programs that we're talking about, most of these programs are going to cost at least that much. So in order for the Alberta Law Foundation to be able to give any of the money to the people who need it, they have to have ministerial approval if it's over $250,000, according to Bill 39. But that was just the start. And that's a lot. That's an awful lot. Because right after that came Bill 14. And with Bill 14, there were some even more bigger changes where the UCP gave themselves pretty much direct command and control over what the Alberta Law Foundation was doing with their programs. First of all, it allowed the Minister of Justice, that's Mickey Amery, to make bylaws and unmake bylaws. And regardless of what the foundation board says, they don't get a choice. They just have to like it. So Mickey Amery can go in and amending or repealing a bylaw made by the board. He can issue bylaws made by the board, and the board has to do it. They cannot change anything. So let's say that Mickey Amery made a bylaw saying that everybody had to do, I don't know, 100 push-ups before every board meeting. They would have to do it. And if the board wanted to say that is a very bad bylaw and it has absolutely nothing to do with what we do here, and I went to the gym before the meeting, so I don't really need to do all these push-ups. We don't need to do that, do we? Let's just remove the bylaw. No. If it's a minister-created bylaw, the board has no power to remove it. It's absolute power. But it didn't stop there. Also, the minister is able to make directives. Subject to the regulations, the minister may, by order, issue directives that must be followed by the foundation, the board, or both in carrying out their powers and duties under this act. A directive is effective immediately, unless otherwise specified by the minister, and prevails to the extent of any consistency or conflict with bylaws made by the board. So if there's bylaws that say, hey, we're not going to punch seals. We like seals. They're cute. They're fuzzy. And Mickey Amery says, I've issued a new directive that says before every board meeting, a seal must be punched. Then the board can't be like, yeah, but we got this rule saying that we don't punch seals over here. Mickey Amory's seal punching rule directive now becomes required for any of the board members. There's also regulatory power. So the minister make regulations prescribing matters in respect of which the board must make bylaws. So he gets control now over how the board even makes bylaws. Establishing requirements for how the board must address a matter in the bylaws, establishing procedures for the minister to make, amend, or repeal bylaws, and establishing procedures for the minister to issue directives. So Mickey Amory basically said, okay, cool. You guys can do the things. It would be great if you did the things. Love it if you did the hard work of managing this Alberta Law Foundation. But here's the thing. I get complete control and I get complete oversight and I get the power to overrule any of your decisions. Cool, right? That's a work environment you'd like to be part of. And just to put the cherry on top, they also included in Bill 14 that by no later than 15 days after coming into force of the section, they had to pay that now 50% of the funding for legal aid, which is a whopping $30.5 million. $30 million, $30,478,295. That's what they had to do. And then they have to pay next year's as well. They had to pay it by September 29th. So that's great. That sounds like a work environment that you can imagine a lot of people would like to be a part of, right? Nope, because they all quit. I'm not even joking. The entire Law Foundation staff gave 2 weeks notice on January 5th, 2026, reportedly in protest of all of the government overreach. The governing board of the Law Foundation, and this is where we're going to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, is made up of board members who were appointed by the Alberta Law Foundation Board of Directors. So there's 2 of them that are appointed by the foundation themselves. So the foundation can be like, hey, we need somebody who's good at Triscuits. Let's find somebody who's good at making Triscuits for our board meetings. And they can go out and find the very best Triscuit maker. Obviously, I'm being a little bit glib. They can find 2 of them, in fact. There are 2 that are appointed by the Law Society of Alberta, and then there are 3 that are appointed by the Minister of Justice. The Law Society removed the 2 appointed board members on January 13th. Moira Rose Vane from the story here. She told Post Media that, quote, I'm not the first person to be removed from a board in the province for challenging this government, and I imagine I will not be the last, she said. While my lawyer reviews the legality of this action, what I will carry forward with pride is my time working alongside the leadership and staff of the Law Foundation. Their skill, dedication, and integrity have been the highlight of my professional life. She added, I have always acted without exception in the best interests of the foundation and its mandate. If my removal is meant to send a message, let me return it loudly and clearly. This was an act of appeasement, and history is not kind to those who choose appeasement over courage. I love that quote. It is so relevant for so much that's going on in our province right now.